A teenage Elon Musk landed in Canada with roughly $2,000 and no connections. Just a name nobody knew and a plan nobody believed. Most people assume he inherited his empire or got lucky when tech exploded. He didn't. What actually built him was a chain of bets so dangerous they nearly erased everything he had. Picture this: a small office in Palo Alto, 1995. No beds, no shower. Elon Musk and his brother Kimball are sleeping on futons they drag to the floor, then walking to the nearest YMCA every morning to clean up before their first meetings. Not because they were broke in the way most people understand broke, but because every dollar they had was pointed at one thing: keeping Zip2 alive. That was the pattern from the very beginning. Not comfort, not security, conversion. Zip2 was essentially an internet version of a business directory, a searchable map guide for newspapers at a time when most people still found restaurants in the yellow pages. It was unglamorous. It was operational. And in February 1999, Compaq wrote a check for $307 million to own it. Musk, holding a roughly 7% stake, personally walked away with $22 million. At 27 years old, he had more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. Most people would have stopped there, bought a house, taken a breath, called it a win. Musk wired most of it straight into a new company. He called it X.com, an online payments platform built on the idea that moving money digitally should be as simple as sending an email. He put approximately $12 million of his own Zip2 payout directly into it. That is not a rounding error. That is more than half of everything he had just earned, pointed at a startup with no proven product and no guaranteed market. The bet was immediate, total, and deliberate. X.com merged with a rival company called Confinity in 2000, and the combined entity was eventually rebranded as PayPal. Inside that merger, Musk was named CEO. Then, mid-flight, the board removed him. He was ousted from the company he had built and funded, replaced by Peter Thiel, while the whole thing was still airborne. A different person might have sold their shares in anger and walked. Musk held them. That decision, quiet, cold, calculated, is what separated this moment from a cautionary tale. In October 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion. Musk, still holding roughly 11% of the company, despite being pushed out of the CEO role, walked away with approximately $180 million after taxes. He had turned $22 million into $180 million in 3 years through a company he no longer ran by simply refusing to flinch when it would have been easy to rage quit. But here is the part that reveals everything about how Musk's mind actually works. He did not buy a mansion first. He did not park the money somewhere safe. According to multiple accounts of this period, he sat down and began calculating how to split $180 million across two companies. Companies that did not yet exist in any meaningful form. One would attempt to build reusable rockets and colonize Mars. The other would try to force the American auto industry to abandon the internal combustion engine entirely. Both ideas were considered by most serious people in Silicon Valley at the time to be somewhere between delusional and suicidal. His closest advisors reportedly begged him to reconsider. Not one of those bets, both of them, simultaneously went down, with nearly everything he had. The pattern that started on a futon in Palo Alto was now operating at a scale that could genuinely destroy him. Every dollar earned had been fed into the next, larger, more dangerous machine. Zip2 funded X.com. X.com became PayPal. PayPal funded two companies that most rational investors would not touch. The chain was unbroken, and it was accelerating, straight toward the single most dangerous moment of Elon Musk's financial life. When Musk got pushed out of PayPal by his own board, he still held his shares instead of selling out of spite. Would you have done the same, or cashed out the second they showed you the door? Drop your answer in the comments below, because what he did next with that $180 million is where the story gets genuinely terrifying. 3 months after that PayPal fortune was split between two companies most rational people wouldn't touch, the chain Musk had been building since that futon in Palo Alto finally reached its breaking point. By late 2008, both SpaceX and Tesla were dying at the same time. Not struggling, not facing headwinds. Dying. SpaceX had just watched its third rocket explode. 3 launches, 3 failures. The engineers at the company knew what that meant. There was barely enough money left for one more attempt, and if that 4th rocket failed, the company was finished. No dramatic pivot, no second chance, just over. Meanwhile, Tesla couldn't make payroll. The global financial crisis had frozen investor money solid. GM and Chrysler, companies with a century of infrastructure behind them, were collapsing into government bailouts. Nobody in their right mind was writing checks to an unproven electric car startup run by a man who was simultaneously trying to build rockets. Tesla was 3 days from bankruptcy, and Musk had already poured in everything he had. Here's the part that strips this story of any motivational poster gloss. Musk was personally broke. He didn't own a house. He was borrowing money from friends just to cover his own rent. The man who had walked away from PayPal with roughly $180 million had fed every dollar of it into these 2 machines, and both machines were about to stop. He made a decision that almost no one in his position would make. He did not choose which company to save. He refused to let either one die, even though saving both simultaneously on a personal credit line that no longer existed was, by any financial logic, impossible. Then September 28, 2008 arrived. The 4th Falcon 1 lifted off from a small island in the Pacific. It cleared the atmosphere. It reached orbit, becoming, in that moment, the first privately developed liquid-fueled rocket in history to do so. SpaceX had not just survived, it had done something no private company had ever done before. Weeks later, NASA handed SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract for cargo resupply missions to the International Space Station. Then Christmas Eve came. At 6 p.m., with investors already leaving town for the holiday and Tesla 3 days from the end, a $40 million funding round closed. Musk later described it plainly. Last hour, last day possible. The wire transferred. Payroll was covered. Tesla didn't die on December 24, 2008. Both companies survived the same 90-day window. Not because of luck, and not because the market turned kind. Because Musk had made the calculated decision to keep feeding both fires even when he had nothing left to burn. What followed was compounding at a scale that has no clean historical comparison. Tesla went public in 2010. SpaceX's valuation climbed steadily as it rewrote what private aerospace could do. Reusable rockets, government contracts, a satellite network blanketing the planet. By 2025 and into 2026, SpaceX alone was valued in the hundreds of billions. Musk's combined net worth reached a figure that had never existed in recorded history. Not just the richest person alive, but richer than entire national economies of countries with millions of citizens. And here's what that number actually represents. It is not genius distilled into a bank balance. It is not luck that compounded quietly in the background. It is the exhaust produced by a chain of bets that started on a futon in 1995, ran through a $22 million payout that immediately became fuel for the next machine, survived a CEO removal that a lesser person would have rage quit, and then held together through a single 90-day stretch in 2008 when everything, simultaneously, nearly collapsed. The teenager who landed in Canada with $2,000 and no connections didn't build the largest private fortune in history by avoiding risk. He built it by making the risk so total, so deliberate, and so irreversible that the only direction left was through. Subscribe for more stories like this and then watch the next one.